Good afternoon, everyone. We are here live at MTA headquarters in the financial district in Lower Manhattan. This time we decided to use YouTube live. Here we are with wonderful uh, transit reporters and Tim Minton. Oh, Alfonso Castillo decided to stay in Long Island. Yep, there's nothing new on that. And as a reminder, tomorrow will be the 118th birthday of the subway system. And the time is 1:35, 68 degrees, mostly cloudy skies here in the Big Apple. And then we have New York City Transit President Rich Davey. Jose, tomorrow is the birthday of the subway. Yep, 18. Then we have the Long Island Railroad Metro North President Catherine Rinaldi. Then we have the MTA CFO Kevin Willis. Well, on the screen up there we have David Meyer from the New York Post. We have Alfonso Castillo from Newsday.
Spain too. I can say.
Among others. We have the president of Bridges and Tunnels. And right here in the front, we have the Transit Squad. And we want to congratulate Dan Rivoli, whose birthday is tomorrow. And at the same time, we want to congratulate at the end Clayton Gus, who is joining WNYC as of Friday. And over here in front of me, Kevin Duggan, who has joined Dave Colon in Streets blog. So that is extraordinary news. And here comes Tim Minton and Jan Lieber.
Let's fire it up. Here we go, everybody. Channel Lieber.
Good afternoon. I think this was a board meeting that really showed where the MTA is at right now, thinking a lot about safety and how to respond to the issues of safety under the leadership of the governor and the mayor. This has clearly created a significant barrier for a lot of riders, in fact and in perception, and it has to be addressed. So we've talked about that a lot today. But we also talked about kind of the core mission of the MTA. Rich Davey talking about what we are doing to make service better and faster, cleaner, and more appealing to get riders back, which has always been my focus. And Jessica Matthew talking about how we are going to deal with, among other things, the problem of climate change by improving micro-mobility options and the connectivity for folks who can only get to subways or buses or commuter railroads with the use of bikes and other micro-mobility options. And we talked about something that has been at the forefront of the MTA's, both the criticisms and the story about the MTA, which is how do we do capital projects? Are we being efficient? Are we operating within reasonable budgets and schedules? And I just thought it was amazing that Mark was able to encapsulate the progress that's been made with how we manage capital projects in his report on Third Track. So that's kind of the balance, that we continue the core mission even though we are facing this huge challenge in the public safety areas. So I think it was an important board meeting from all of those respects. So with that little introduction, we'll turn it over to Maestro Minton.
Thank you, Jano. It is a privilege to be able to say one more time, Clayton Gusa of the New York Daily News.
Two today, Jano. How are you? The first one's probably a comfortable question for you. What happens to the MTA in your eyes if Lee Zeldin gets elected governor, and do you stay on as chairman in that scenario?
When I did my confirmation hearing, it's obviously for a term. Somebody asked me, why do you want this job? And I said honestly that if you're a New Yorker and you're passionate about the mass transit system, and you're passionate about the city, this is the ultimate way to contribute to the thing I love most other than family, which is New York. And I'm focused on how we can get it done. Elections will take care of themselves, and we have to get through this one. But right now our focus is on the stuff that I just talked about, which is how to deliver a safer system, better service, deliver the capital projects, and also change the world a little bit in terms of climate opportunities with things like micro-mobility. So that's where my head is at. But elections will run their course.
I want to ask about East Side Access. You've got FRA safety approvals that you're still waiting on and escalator construction. Are those going to be finished by the end of the year, and is there a chance that this timeline gets pushed back?
Clayton, I've been on this at the MTA for 5 years, about 5 years. In 2018, I doubled down on the schedule after everybody came before said, we got to push it out a couple more years. I'm not pushing it out. Everybody is working every day, all day. The governor was down there with me on Saturday, just before the announcement that was made, and took another walk around to see the progress that's being made. It's, the work that's going on now is highly technical. It's testing all kinds of systems, fire alarm and otherwise, but it's running our course. And we always said we were going to get it done in 2022, and that's still our schedule.
All right, thanks, Clayton. We're going to move back to the mezzanine. Darla Miles from...
Just let it be noted, Minton, that Clayton only asked for 2. Some of the other questions.
The news conference is young, sir. But
Yeah.
Darla Miles, Channel 7 Eyewitness News back there.
Hi, Tim. Great to see you. It's been a while, and good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Lieber, Darla Miles, Channel 7 Eyewitness News. I have 2 questions as well. The first question is with regards to the subway, the CARE program. There was extensive detail that you shared today about the different agencies that will be assisting in dealing with emotionally disturbed persons who might be psychotic. Do you feel as if the MTA may be bearing an unfair burden of the mentally ill, especially since they kind of funnel their way into the system? If that makes sense, with all due respect.
You know, no, it's a fair question, as Jose would say. It's also a good question. Listen, I always say that New York lives or dies on the public spaces. We're a city because of our density that relies on our public spaces for good, because we want them to be dynamic and interesting at what's making New York exciting. But if our public spaces become uncomfortable or scary, we have to do something. So we, together with the governor and the mayor and the state agencies that oversee mental health, are taking action. That's what the governor talked about, is we have been for quite some time working to get homelessness out of the subway system. The numbers were down on overall homelessness, but there is a persistent problem with the severely mentally ill. These are folks, it's not a huge group, but they have a disproportionate impact on the experience of being in the subway. So we have to do something. We have to do something for them, to protect them. And we also have to do something for the riders who are unsettled, they're compassionate, but they're unsettled when they see somebody acting out or having psychotic episodes, and even, God forbid, getting aggressive. So we are doing something. That's why you heard from the governor the CARE program, which the CARE aspect of cops, cameras, and CARE, which says we're going to develop a special facility for subway severely mentally ill people who right now need a place to go indoors where they can be hospitalized, taken off the streets until they start to get better. And in many cases, that means folks who have already had mental health treatment getting back on their meds. But what we can't do is send them to Bellevue and have them cycle out in a couple days or a couple of hours. That's what the governor's changing. That's the new story here, is CARE, but also where necessary, confinement in a hospital setting until they can start to get better, so that they're not in the public space and scaring the heck out of people.
Absolutely. As a quick follow-up to my first question, just to clarify your position, would that mean the MTA's position is no, it's not bearing the brunt, and that it's a multi-agency response? I just want to make sure.
The MTA is a public space. Every public space in New York has challenges with different kinds of folks, but we're a space that's where people feel confined and they feel vulnerable, and we must protect the safety and the perception of safety in that public space. That's why you saw that proposal and that initiative from the governor to get severely mentally ill people out of the subways and into CARE, like it or not.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Quickly, the second question is with regard to the Columbus Circle fatal train incident. Do you have an update on that investigation? Just a few bullet points that have been raised, whether or not the train conductor was looking out of the window when the victim's foot was stuck, and what would be the capacity of the train to stop in an emergency situation like that? Just any updates?
Yeah, listen, it's premature, honestly. The investigation is ongoing, so it's premature to draw any conclusions. What we do know right now is these kinds of fatalities are exceedingly rare in our system. Right? There was no criminality involved. It's important because folks to understand. What we also know is that there's a family who's suffering, who lost a promising person who's a sort of a consummate New Yorker, a 20-year-old who got into the stagehands union, who was working at one of our cultural facilities, which are trying to rebound from COVID. I mean, this is every loss of life in the mass transit system breaks my heart. This one, is a little extra. That the randomness that somebody dies who's just on the way to their job, working in a cultural facility, breaks your heart. That's a family that we're all thinking about and feeling for right now.
Thank you, Mr. Lieber.
And we move on to Anna Lay of the New York Times. Anna.
Hey, Jano. I wanted to ask you about something you raised earlier. You said that having more officers on platforms has led to more arrests, but as we know, there have been some really scary incidents where there have been cops on the platform and the thing still happens. So is it really justifiable to keep adding more officers to the system? And I also want to ask you about fare evasion. What is the priority with that? Is it to make more money for the MTA, or is it to make people feel safe?
So start with fare evasion. So the first priority with fare evasion has to be safety. It has to be the goal of keeping out as many folks who might do crime or who are carrying weapons as possible. As I said during my presentation today, not every fare evader is a criminal. That is definitely the case. We have kids, we have all kinds of people who make mistakes or do things in the spur of the moment. But overwhelmingly, the criminals are fare evaders. So if we do a decent job of discouraging fare evasion and stopping people who are engaged in it, we're going to catch a lot of criminals. So it is very much first and foremost a safety initiative. There is also, honestly, this is part of the spirit of New York, that sense of fairness that, that you don't want to be playing by the rules when somebody next to you is jumping the turnstile or going into fare gate for free. And we're trying to sort of create the spirit of the subway, the spirit of public space in New York is we all help each other. We all play by the same set of rules. We want to reestablish that. That's why we balancing the goals of fairness and making sure that fare evasion is not a crime of poverty with the safety goal and the reality of the MTA's economic situation. So all those things feed into it, but principally it's a safety issue first and foremost. Your second question had to do with the number, the horrific incidents that we've had are alarming and scary, and we have to deal with them, but they're small in numbers. So I wouldn't judge the efficacy of any individual strategy by saying, well, there was a cop on the platform when something bad happened. Broadly speaking, our riders tell us again and again and again, the one thing that makes them feel safe is seeing a uniformed cop. And second, that we see again and again that cops do intervene in crimes that are happening, and that we actually catch the perpetrators. For all those reasons, deterrence, ridership confidence, and actual enforcement, catching bad guys, having cops on platforms makes a lot of sense. The other reality is having cops on trains makes sense because roughly half of the crimes, put in proportion, we are a city every day of 5 million people plus, even today, on mass transit, and we have 5 to 6 crimes. That's about the size of Los Angeles. If there were 5 to 6 major felonies in Los Angeles, we would all be thrilled. But because it impacts on people's sense of safety in New York so much, and everybody takes the train or a bus or a commuter rail, it has a disproportionate impact. So we really need to deal with the feeling of safety, but the reality of safety. That means putting cops on trains where they are going to actually be present when there is something like half of the crimes that happen in the subway take place on the trains.
But the crime rate is up, right, as we're adding more officers. How do you
Well, it's, early days. When you're trying to arrest a phenomenon that dates back to the beginnings of COVID, sort of the gradual deterioration of a lot of public behavior and public space behavior, may take a little while. And I grew up in New York in the 70s, so I'm in the, you cannot convince me
Baby boomer.
that we can't fix problems in New York. We are nowhere near where we were in the 70s or even the late 80s and early 90s. In general, I'm convinced that, as we did under Mayor Dinkins, that we can reverse a pattern of increasing crime, and especially some of these major incidents, by having good old-fashioned police enforcement. Our riders are telling us that's what they want, and we're listening to them.
And next up on the Zoom transmission is David Meyer of the New York Post. David, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Jano. Good afternoon, everybody. Sorry to not be there today in person. Couple questions related to fare evasion. One, Jana, you said that, the majority of people who are committing crimes are fare beaters. Is there any data to back that up? And my second question is, how much money has been recouped from the MTA's fare evasion enforcement efforts so far this year? I know you said it was going to lose $500 million. Has what's happened since May reduced that number at all?
Yeah, I mean, it's premature. Remember, our projections of fare evasion economic impact are based on scientific sampling, so it's sort of premature to say that we've altered it. But I can tell you that the MTA's revenues are up. Some of that is, our ridership is up, our paid ridership is up. So how much of that is attributable to deterrence of fare evasion? Too early to tell, but that's the best indicator of how we're doing economically in terms of paid ridership.
All right, you have a follow-up, Dave? We're not.
You're muted, David. David, you're muted.
You muted yourself. There it is.
Oh, he lost it.
It's like a video game. If you get it back, we'll come back to you. In the meantime.
I'm here.
Oh!
It's weird because you unmute me and I unmute me and then I mute myself. It's the whole thing. My other question was about whether you have any data to back up the suggestion that most people who commit felony crimes on the subway are fare evaders.
We'll try to pull it together for you. What we have is the arrests and the date. The indicators of whether people who were stopped and arrested for arrested because of criminality, not just because they didn't pay the fare. Remember, we give a summons for that, or a ticket in effect, until it becomes a recidivist or multiple repeat situation, or if they have an outstanding warrant or another crime. So, but we will try to pull that together for you because we know you're hot on the track.
I would stay on Zoom, go out east to Alfonso Castillo, the head of Newsday's Transit Bureau. Alfonso.
So,
Hi, Jano. Thanks for doing this. So I have two questions related to Sandy and the East River Tunnel repairs. As you know, we're coming up on the 10th anniversary. I listened to the presentation on Monday detailing all the progress you've made with Sandy. One thing that's not done that I know is not your project, Amtrak's project, repairing the East River tunnels. As I understand it, the work that's going to go on is one of the reasons why you're not going to offer as much service as you do right now at Penn Station and once you start running to Grand Central Madison. So can you talk a bit about that? I mean, how much of a hindrance, how hamstrung is the MTA by the fact that the railroad is going to be down one tunnel for a number of years at Penn Station?
Well, it has an impact on the capacity of the system, Alfonso. It's one tunnel out of four. There are other variables, obviously capacity in Jamaica, capacity in other nodes of the system, number of rail cars and so on and so on. But it definitely has an impact. But to your broader point, the new schedule which we rolled out is, and I know you have debated with MTA a little bit the numbers, but from our standpoint, it's a 40% increase over in terms of the amount of service when we have 65% or so of our pre-COVID ridership. So there's a lot of extra service for ridership which is still bouncing back. So while I think we've tried to explain that the principal goal of this effort is to achieve what was reflected in the last paragraph of your story, which I read all the way to the end of, which is somebody saying, for me, this is kind of life-changing to be able to go to Grand Central. Last paragraph, but for 45% of our riders, the new schedule with Grand Central Madison is more convenient and saves them up to 40 minutes a day, so they don't have to hoof it back and forth to Penn. That's the big story. We can add additional service if ridership warrants, when Amtrak completes their work. It's not ours, it's theirs, although we're contributing to it. That's the plan, is that we'll evaluate whether that's warranted at that time.
Okay.
Is that responsive?
It is, and a follow-up on that, so I spoke with Amtrak last week. I guess they're talking 2024 to really kind of in earnest begin construction on the repairs. That'll be 12 years after Sandy. As I understand it, that timetable was made in coordination with the MTA, in part because of east-side access.
Amtrak didn't design the project.
Uh-huh.
So, like, it is now being
It is
worked
designed.
into the schedule based on where they are, right? So let's just be clear. It was worked into the schedule based on where they were in the design process and whether they were ready to go, okay?
Right, but as I understand it, one of the factors in their timeline is an agreement with the MTA that it was best to take on this work after East Side Access was complete, and you had some redundancy into Manhattan. So can you talk about that and whether it was a good idea to push these repairs back so many years? You're talking now it'll be a dozen years before this work gets started.
So, East Side Access was well underway, and that project wasn't designed. So obviously, it is a benefit to the project if we have the extra tunnels that serve East Side Access, the Grand Central Madison service, right? The additional tunnel capacity before they take tunnels out. That's the basis of the thinking. Does that make sense? I mean, that's the whole story, Alfonso, which is they didn't have a design project, but they knew that when we finished Grand Central Madison East Side Access, that we would have additional cross Hudson capacity that would offset what they were taking out of service to some extent.
So is suffice to say you would have liked to have seen this done sooner?
I am anxiously looking forward to all of the, we did 9 tunnels in the time since Sandy, and without, several of them without shutting down the L train, the F train, Rutgers Tunnel. They didn't want to go that way, but we are very much looking forward to having the additional capacity and flexibility that their project will deliver.
All right, Alfonso appearing today from the Newsday podcast studio. You can see that you gave enough material for the whole episode. We got Jose Martinez here in the center from the city. Jose.
Good afternoon, Jano. Following up a little bit on what Alfonso asked about in terms of Sandy projects. On Monday, we heard Jamie and Dana talk about some of the Sandy work that has been done, that has been successful. You just mentioned some of it again yourself in terms of the tunnels. But can you speak a little bit, please, to the work that still remains along the Rockaway line? One of the committee books this week cites how it's fallen behind schedule, and I believe that's not the first time that the work on the Rockaway line has been behind schedule, and also cost has gone up. So,
a couple things. One, we've done $150 million of resiliency work in the Rockaways during Sandy. This is, if you saw the video, you may have seen, Demetrius was narrating it, and he talked about areas of the system that are exposed to the elements because they're actually like little bridges crossing over the water over Jamaica Bay. This is one of those. So it is a complicated project. It also needs to be carefully coordinated with the community because it has impacts on on A-train service in and out of the Rockaways, which is obviously important to that waterfront community. So, and we're also, like many projects, trying to manage the contracting community's capacity. We're doing so much work that the contracting community sometimes asks for more time to evaluate and bid a job. You heard from Mark Roche today about how much we're relying on with these design build projects. It's not a question of you just give a bunch of drawings and then they price it and send it back in for low bid. You actually have a very complex interactive process where we say to the contractors, we want your best ideas on how to minimize the schedule, budget, give us ideas about efficiency, how do we minimize impact on the community. So there's a lot of back and forth. Sometimes contractors as a group will say, you know what, we need another month. I think this is one such occasion where they're doing so much different work, and it's a not unlimited pool of contractors, and to get good bids when they put their thinking caps on, on budget and schedule sometimes requires giving them a little more time. This, I think, is one such instance. Now, can I talk about what remains in the Sandy program, or you want to continue on another topic? What remains is the East River tunnels, a bunch of work that is attributable to the fact that we got better bids on a lot of the Sandy work than expected. So the result was that we had extra money and we could do extra projects, which we're now doing. And otherwise, it is almost all projects, other than those two categories, that rely on some third party, like a utility or another government agency, in order for the work to proceed. So, you know, if you're really interested in it, we can dig in, but that's what remains principally on the Sandy program.
And on the Rockaway line, is it on weekends that the riding public will mostly feel that impact in terms of work being done?
I think it may be longer outages than just the weekends, but and that's one of the reasons that time is being taken to make sure that, you know, there's community dialogue and elected official dialogue.
All right, reporting for Streets Blog, Kevin Duggan. Kevin.
Welcome to your new job, Kevin.
Thanks, John. I've got two questions. The first one is, I think you referenced on the Monday committee meetings that you had a meeting about the anti-Asian hate crimes. I saw Pete Buttigieg was at that meeting as well. So if you share it all, if you talked to him, or if you have a sense that the feds are giving the MTA the money you guys are looking for all different projects.
Well, I mean, it was really a discussion about, you know, broader issues, making sure everybody feels safe in transit. That was really the discussion point. It was a private meeting. I'll let the Secretary's office comment further if they wish. But I did take the occasion to point out that the federal government, after 9/11, went into the business of funding transit safety in a big way. And for a long time, there was $350 million a year nationally available. That number went down to $100 million in 2012, and it hasn't gone up since. So the MTA is getting a small slice of a much smaller pie on the issue of transit safety. And, you know, although this was not a meeting to, you know, to pitch for funding, I just did take the occasion to make sure the Secretary was aware, although it's, I think, outside his normal committee, the jurisdiction in Congress, that was the trend. We've, as a result, had to spend a lot of our own money without any federal support. For example, the camera initiative. So we would let, you know, just made sure that was on the agenda.
Okay, I think my second question might be for, it's on the bike and pedestrian.
Jessica Matthews.
Yeah, so it might be for Jessica Matthews.
Come on.
You know, you mentioned during the presentation.
Oh, let her get
yeah,
up.
I'll wait. Hi, you mentioned during the presentation that having bike lanes to a lot of the MTA bridges is very complicated, and the MTA in the past has studied a very expensive proposal for the Verrazano. Are you guys looking at all about simpler solutions like New York City did on Brooklyn Bridge, just taking a car lane? I've heard from advocates that Gil Hodges Bridge would be a pretty straightforward one. Are you guys looking at those solutions at all, at like lower cost, pretty straightforward ways to enhance bike access on the bridges?
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely looking at all opportunities. Low-cost options are definitely on the table. Most immediately, we're looking to expand the number of busters that have bike racks on board. In terms of looking at some of the Marine Parkway Bridge, for example, one of the key things we're looking at is where we think there is demand for cycling, and making sure we're serving our equity goals for the areas of the city that don't have many other options, are far from subway stations, and that's how we're really thinking about prioritizing those investments when we look ahead and both operating and capital sides.
Are there any bridges that you think would be a good candidate for that kind of treatment, taking a car lane for a bike lane, two-way bike lane?
I mean, we're evaluating options. I will say, you know, the bridges, again, the demand needs to be there in order for that to make sense. And, you know, we're working closely with bridges and tunnels to look at options.
Thanks.
All right, we move on back to the Zoom one final time. Christopher Robbins standing by for Hellgate, what appears to be the home office at an ancient Greek temple. Chris.
Hello, I'm actually at the Earth Church on Avenue C. It's a bombed out Capital One bank branch. long story.
Alphabet City. That's Alphabet City.
Two quick questions.
Yeah.
You mentioned in the meeting that the city and the state are going to be splitting the cost of all the new NYPD overtime shifts. How much is that OT expected to cost, and what's the breakdown? Yeah.
Again, I'm obviously I'm the MTA. Those are just city-state discussions. So, but it's in the millions. It's millions, more tens of millions of dollars for additional shifts and overtime to accomplish the mission.
Second question is, what is the metric the MTA is using for whether all this extra police presence is a success or not? And at what specific point will the MTA say, okay, we can direct this extra public safety funding to our operating budget or whatever else to improve train service?
Right. So I think your last question sort of framed the second one, which is the MTA is not paying for the additional state and city investment in the NYPD shifts. What we're contributing is some extra work by our MTA PD force that's located in those big commuter terminals, Grand Central, Penn, Atlantic, Jamaica, taking advantage of that because people are already there and they know the facility, for them to, in fact, supplement or in some case, is free up NYPD officers to other duties or other missions at other locations. So that's our contribution. The MTA, is not losing any policing capacity because the state police are coming in to backfill some of the tasks that they would normally perform. So from our standpoint, there isn't a financial impact, and we're, obviously you're well aware of our pitch on our financing situation, and we're making that to both state and city, who are both contributors to our budget, operational and capital.
Thank you.
All right, if you stay with the monitor for a moment, Jimmy Vielkind of the Wall Street Journal is up there in front of some yellow tape, which appears in this case to be Halloween related. Jimmy.
Thanks, Tim. It's a shame not to be in the fluorescent light with you all. Just wondering, I know that the city has put online its relief center at Rainbows Island. The M35 goes there, but there have been talk about establishing additional service. I'm wondering where that stands, and if, given what we've seen from the initial head count, the authority feels that there's still a need for that.
Jimmy, it's a fair question. I'm going to turn to Rich Davey, see if he has any expertise about that, because I have not been involved with that issue, in fairness.
Turns out I don't have it.
Rich.
Yeah, Jimmy, it turns out I don't know either, but happy to get some more information for you.
So it's a fair question. We just don't know the answer right now. So we're going to get
Tell him to ask EA.
So clearly nothing thus far.
Nothing so far, but we're going to check to make sure we're not missing something.
Oh, he's selling.
All right, let's move on then back to the House. Michelle Caskey down there from
Bloomberg.
News. Michelle.
Hi, Jano. So I know you've been talking about safety a lot today, and when you're saying that this is a significant barrier for riders. So, for riders who are very frustrated by this, they've seen these announcements before of more cops into the stations and on the cars, and they've seen announcements of a change in strategy where cops are going to ride the trains for longer and over through multiple boroughs, and more health professionals in the system working with people. They still continue to be frustrated by this. What do you say to them when they hear this latest news where they think, well, this is just numbers, but I need to get to work safely, I need my kids to get to school safely?
Well, what I say to them is I feel you, that we completely respect and share what the riders are feeling. The riders, we have less, broadly speaking, less subway transit numerically than we had before COVID, but that doesn't make any difference to riders who are seeing alarming stories, sometimes horrific stories about things, even if they're single-digit numbers. So my response is, this is a process. Again, I just remind everybody, because there are a lot of New Yorkers who have this perspective. It took us a while to dig out of a much, much deeper hole in the past in terms of safety in the public space in New York. And we are nowhere near the battle days of the 70s and the late 80s and early 90s.
Oh, we are
But
there, all
we
right,
have
General.
to
And I've been saying
get
this
our
for
arms
years.
around the perception of subway safety that is based on some horrific incidents that have happened recently, and we're reacting. We are not standing by and waiting for it to magically heal itself. I think that you're not wrong that some of this has been tried before, but it has been incremental. We started with, and we asked the de Blasio administration unsuccessfully, more cops. Then we asked for them to be put on the platforms and the trains. It was only when I had Mayor Adams inaugurate it that I got there. Then we actually started pushing the camera agenda. Then we started the end-of-line agenda initiative, which, Clayton covered it directly. I'm not sure others have actually seen it, but we have pretty big operations at these end-of-line stations that combine PD, clinicians, outreach workers, MTA professionals to try to persuade people to get into shelter and out of housing themselves in the public space on the subways. And now we're dealing with what I think of as a pretty serious element that's emerged, which is severely mentally ill people. We all know that there was some deinstitutionalization that was going on during COVID. I'm not an expert, but anything that was a congregate setting, there was some fear that COVID would fly through those institutions, and for whatever set of reasons, a lot of people ended up in the public space who really need mental health care urgently. And it's bad for them, and it's really bad for our riders. They're out there. So now we're doing that. So this has been an ongoing step. It's not quite as repetitive, I think, as your, but we're just trying to respond. The watchword is we've got to make the riders feel safe again. That's the bottom line. And what they're telling us, they want to see more police. That's what they're telling us.
Okay. Just a second question. Along the lines of safety, what about this issue of gaps between the subway platform and the subway trains?
Yeah.
And, I know there was a lawsuit filed yesterday. I don't need you to talk about the lawsuit, I understand. But just this issue of, is the MTA looking into how it can increase safety where some of the stations where there is a pretty sizable gap? And it's very easy for people to fall into the gaps.
Well, is Q here?
Q.
Join me up here. Somebody have a handheld?
Yeah, we do.
I know you said you didn't want to suggest the lawsuit, but I will take an opportunity to say that this lawsuit comes at a shock to all of us here at the MTA. When we've made an unprecedented investment on accessibility since I arrived here, since the chairman took office. We have $5.5 billion in the current capital plan for accessibility, over 15 stations that we made accessible. Since, in this capital plan, we have 70 more in the plan right now, and a settlement that we came to agreement with the disability community and advocates at the table with us. So we're really shocked. I'm a little disheartened that this came tonight, but we'll address it in the courts.
Yeah, and so we're committed. This is part of ADA, and we've made a huge commitment to that, and we're going to keep executing. So that's really our very high level of commitment on that issue as a part of the overall ADA initiative.
So addressing the gaps is part of
ADA.
Okay.
Yeah, and you just go look at the Times Square shuttle, which we knocked out during COVID, redid it completely. If you remember how you had to run around to get to the third track, or they called it track 4, that was eliminated. Part of that was because that was the oldest part of the system. It had curves. It had those gaps. We closed them. We created an ADA accessible station, and we're going to keep doing that as we go. But Michelle, just because you forcefully raised the issue of safety, I just want to call out again. I did mention it during my remarks, but today or last night, there was actually a fare evasion stop resulted in, no, it was an intervention of a guy who was on a train drinking. Cops intervened, checking the ID, outstanding warrant on a violent crime, results in a frisk, loaded gun. So fair evasion enforcement, but also quality of life enforcement, it's just something that we have asked for, does yield results, and we don't know how many crimes are avoided when you actually take those kinds of actions, have those kinds of results. In this case, the cops were successful, the NYPD was successful, and that's the approach that we're taking.
All right, approaching the finish line, we see Ben Brockfeld here from AM New York. Ben, good afternoon. Welcome to the MTA's news conference.
Thank you, Jana. Thanks for taking my questions. So I wanted to ask about the potential masks. A bunch of people testified to the board this morning requesting that you, or I guess the MTA, reinstate a mask mandate. Cases are going up. The other day it hit 20% in Manhattan, if I recall correctly. Is the authority giving any thought to reinstating a mask mandate, or taking some people were suggesting mask-only cars, or is there any is the authority considering a mask mandate or any similar things?
Listen, I know you're new to the beat, but you may have noticed that there are a lot of issues on the FDA's plate. What we do in the public health areas, we defer to the relevant federal, state, in some cases city authorities. That's why this is complicated. I very much respect all the folks who feel strongly about mask wearing, but the MTA is not a public health expert, and we're going to defer to the folks who have that responsibility in establishing standards for all the public spaces. One of the, Ben, as you may have noticed, we had really high compliance, but what happened was so many public spaces became mask optional, and then the system started to, the compliance started to erode, even before the public health authorities made their decision. We're going to defer to them every day on this issue, but also really respectful of our riders who have this concern and issue, and we're trying to be respectful of them by how we, with the signage we post and stuff.
I also wanted to ask about the new subway cars, the R211s.
Yes.
You guys approved the $1.78 billion contract, the contract option for Kawasaki. I recall there being, the delays. Obviously, there was COVID that caused delays, but I recall there also being labor issues at their plant in Nebraska, management issues, supply chain stuff. Are those issues resolved, and do you fully expect these new cars to be ready by 2025 as the MTA is putting out?
Listen, project management is an inexact science, so I can't absolutely guarantee that a third party that I don't control will perform. But the issues that have been identified, you said it right, Ben, is that they were mostly COVID related. A rail car has literally tens of thousands of components that come from all over the world, and the whole supply chain breakdown was hugely impactful to that operation, that manufacturing operation of Kawasaki's. They had some, I would say, the way they were managing production, even though they had terrible labor issues. Lincoln, Nebraska happens to have the lowest unemployment in the United States. Who knew? But that was part of it. They were having trouble holding on to workers in the job crunch. But our team has worked with them on all of the project management issues. It's just like managing a construction project, in the subway or Long Island Railroad. You have to stay on top of your contractor and make sure they don't make mistakes. But the reason we did this, we exercised the option, twofold. One, these cars are performing really, really well. There are 130,000, so far the cars that we have in the system are getting 130,000 miles MDBF, mean distance between failures. I mean, they only break down every 130,000 miles on average. That's well beyond the goal. So far, the team is thrilled with the performance of these cars. So it made sense to get more. The other reality is, if you're satisfied and you need more cars, you really ought to exercise the option rather than trying to go through a whole procurement process that you don't know and when it will be completed and so on. So it made sense to exercise the option, but we're going to try to stay on top of them and get, improve their performance.
All right, so as we wrap up today, most of you saw yesterday Clayton tweeted that he is moving on and moving up somewhere else, to be an editor. And I think now it's okay if I share the story. I had asked Clayton some time ago, would you ever leave the Daily News? And you'll remember you said, leave the Daily News. I am the Daily News. I'm the chairman. And then he said to me, I tell you what, if the New England Patriots should ever lose to my Chicago Bears at Foxborough on Monday Night Football, then I'm gone. And look what happened. So we thought we would just celebrate the occasion of Clayton's moving up by taking a quick look back. Something, but we know it's not a fake background because of the way it looks. Anyway, Clayton, you're up.
Okay, thank you. I have three very quick ones I will ask them in succession. First, I have three, but first I just want to re-ask what I asked earlier. He's a guy that's down in the stations all the time, playing horns, surrounded by animatronic Furby or cat dolls. There's three.
Wow, I'm loving this.
For you than the previous. What type of chair are you? Are you one who's going to flop on this, at least publicly, or are you going to be one who's endorsing specific things and getting behind revenue streams that you desperately need?
Well, what's your opinion, Clayton? I can't tell.
But you're seeing things go in the wrong direction for subway crew availability.
So I'm not sure I agree with your numbers. You seem a little cranky today. You're a little Clayton. Yeah. Did you have a bad time on the Amtrak train?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Clayton Gusa of the New York Daily News.
I have three. Each one may be more irritating for you than the previous.
Yeah, I know.
So
do yourself, sir.
What,
It's been real. Thanks, everybody. Good afternoon from Lower Manhattan.
Oh, Tim, you forgot to mention that tomorrow's the happy birthday of the New York City subway.
Tomorrow's Subway Day.
That'll be tomorrow.
Exactly.
This is today. Today is Clayton's day.
Today's Clayton's
Tomorrow
day.
is the subway.